right, welcome everyone. My name is Iram Mihal, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Emory University. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few quick housekeeping announcements. The views and opinions expressed in these learning development webinars are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policies, positions, or views of Emory University, the Emory Alumni Association, or their affiliates. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement. To minimize disruptions, please keep your microphones muted. We do encourage you to keep your camera on and fully engage in the conversation and share any questions through the chat box. And please stay tuned at the very end for some announcement. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass it along to one of our alumni career coaches, Valerie Williams, to get us started. Thanks, Valerie.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Aram, and thank you all for being here. Happy Tuesday to you all. We really appreciate you all taking an hour to chat with us about career pivots and resilience and grit. And we are so excited to be here with you today. We have folks on the panel here from various parts of their career and would love to just share a little bit about my background and then allow them to introduce themselves. And so, as Aram mentioned, I am Valerie Williams. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm currently focused on a lot of leadership and talent development through my consulting firm, Converge, as well as my coaching practice as well. And so I work with a lot of organizations and people who are thinking about up-leveling their career and leadership skills. And so I'm excited to be here with you to talk about what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what we're learning along the way as well. So I will turn it over to Maureen. You want to introduce yourself as well to the panel?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. Maureen Sweatman. I am founder and chief joy officer of Joyful Living Coaching. That's my private practice that is now 10 plus years strong, but I've been a coach in some capacity, 20 plus years now. I'm in the executive phase of career, and worked at Emory actually, for about 15 years and was coaching before we called it coaching in various capacities. Lived in Atlanta about 30 years and just recently relocated back to coastal South Carolina to be with my mom. I'm living the sandwich gap generation dream right now, truly. But yeah, so my work also works with organizations and individuals. I'm on a mission to add more joy to the world. We have enough doom scrolling and all the things we won't talk about, but and for me and what I've worked, I've worked with over 50,000 clients at this point across 20 years. And alignment is really where the joyful sweet spot is. And that's different for every person. So we'll get into the weeds of that, but that's a little bit about who I am. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for that. Nuri.
Nuri Jeong, and I'm a graduate of the neuroscience PhD program at Emory. I graduated back in 2023, so very fresh, relatively. I started my own coaching and corporate training firm called Goals Unhindered, which is all based off of my dissertation research on all about how to achieve goals. And I'm helping my individuals and executive leaders who want to, not succeed in just one area in their life, but how to do it in a balanced way in all aspects of life. Most recently, I've been getting involved with more Korean American communities as well. And as a Korean native, I work with Korean companies wanting to expanding into the US market, helping them with the global march as well. So excited to chat.
Amazing. Thank you, Nuri. Thank you for being here. And Gina.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Gina Robinson. I am a three-time Emory alum, a proud alum of Oxford College 2007, Emory College 2009, and Candler School of Theology in 2016. Also a native of Georgia. I love to mention that because it does give some situatedness to who I am and kind of where I come from, my values, etc. Most recently, I lived in Chicago, Illinois, though I am currently in Texas. So a little bit of everywhere I have been. And as far as my career, I worked for some time in higher education administration. I also have taught as a professor, and then I pivoted from higher ed into social impact, working in the foundation and philanthropy world. However, currently I am unemployed. So if you're one of those who are in the room, you're not alone. If you are navigating a career transition, I am there with you. Again, you are not alone. So I look forward to this conversation and just sharing more about my experience, how I'm managing, and how we will get through this together because we will.
Amazing. Okay, we see we have some strong voices here, some strong perspectives. I'm excited about this conversation. And I didn't mention I actually am went to the business school. I'm at Gosweda. I'm full-time a graduate from that school. And that actually was a big pivot for me in my career. I was transitioning from working in supply chain and operations and knew I didn't want to do that. And Emory really helped me kind of start the journey of my current career trajectory in the sort of talent space that we're in. So I want to open up my first question to the panel to talk about career pivots. You know, sometimes we have career pivots that are in our control. And sometimes we have career pivots that are not in our control, right? Things that happen to us. And so, my first question, really, to anyone who wants to jump in is really what's one career transition that really change your perspective on work and on purpose. And, you know, if one of those moments were something that you didn't plan for, how did you respond? How did you really move forward from that career pivot moment?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. And I didn't name either. So, alumni, I'm a theology and business alumni as well. Kind of the sweet spot for me. So, the first one that comes to mind, there's actually two and they're different. So, I was trying to quickly share them. The first one was right out of grad school. So, right after theology school, I had gotten clear that I didn't want to actually become a pastor and was going to work in community work and NGO work. And um, ended up at an NGO in Atlanta, and within a year, probably within 6 months, realized it was not a fit for me ethically as someone who had just graduated theology school and kind of first professional job had to figure out how to assess alignment. I didn't know what to call it then, but that's what it was. And how to resign and make it clear why I was resigning because they were using discriminatory practices in the name of the church, and I just couldn't be a participant in that, and so I had to figure that out. Connected with mentors, friends, support group to figure out how to move through that as a new professional. And then later in my career, fast forward, I actually ended up working at Emory, helping to build the scholars program, and did my MBA during that. As I was thinking about a pivot, was starting to get the 7-year itch, as they say, and ended up working in community engagement type roles within Emory. And when leadership changes anywhere, they can come in and make sweeping changes. And that happened to my department. And we basically were busted up for parts the way it happens in reorgs and moved to different places. So for me, my goal then, instead of scrambling as a new person and career, was to help get my staff settled because I was director of operations, and to then figure out what was next for me. So I could go on and on, but I want to give others a chance to speak. So for me, I kind of had two pretty profound pivots. And the second one is when I decided to launch my current practice and start to build it up. So
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So one moment was a conscious decision you made to move on from an
mhm,
organization, and then one leadership change that happened to you, and both
mhm,
kind of changed the trajectory of your career.
they did.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Nuri, Gina, anything you might want to add on career pivots or pivotal moments in your career that really changed how you looked at your work or your career?
Well, life is not certain and it's full of surprises. And a year before I was set to graduate, I was hit by a car. And that's something that you don't realize that could happen to, I mean, cognitively, you would know like that could happen to you, but until it happens, it's like, um, I remember sitting on the ground because I was walking, having my legs stuck underneath this huge SUV. I was feeling a lot of pain, but in the moment, I was able to focus on what was most important. I was alive, and I was able to breathe. I was taking the moment for myself to keep myself alive, and and after that, I was kind of looking around, like what was around me, and I saw there's this teenage brother and the driver that was in the car bawling his eyes out. And just seeing that in that moment, I realized it was just as traumatic experience for them as it was for me. Even though they hit me, I know that it was going to be so, just as difficult and challenging for them in the moment. And I was able to have that compassion for them. And the reason why I was able to respond in that way was that I was taking this compassion-based mindfulness practice at Emory, and I had taken this course 6 months in advance, and I'm glad I did because that really helped me with the breathing practices, the way that I was able to feel compassion for someone that, I could be just angry, but instead I chose to focus on what was most important to me. And fast back 4 months later, where I was still, immobile and couldn't do anything at work and stuck at home for several months after surgery, I realized, hey, my time is limited, and how I want to use this time on this earth matters. And so instead of just going through the motion of finding a job and finding a postdoc position or something like that, just to get just to move forward with whatever that was by default, I decided to really take the time, because it was really a protected time in my life, to think and to really imagine, what do I want to get out of this? And I had to go deep and had to figure out what was most meaningful, which was being able to add value based on my knowledge and do it in a way that it was my style. So I'm glad that I had the experience, and I can say that I'm grateful for the experience, because it really gave me the time and the reflection that was needed to become my own and really design the life that I wanted. And that really transitioned me into coaching after getting my own coach, a business coach, and being able to become an entrepreneur and really create this path that didn't seem that all that common after a neuroscience PhD. And I'm grateful.
Yeah. Such a powerful story, Nuri. And your story reminds me that sometimes we think our career is separate from our personal lives, but so much of how we navigate our careers are informed by what's happening to us personally. So I love that you had that compassion resource already locked in. You had taken that 6 months before. And that helped you get through that moment. So we'll dig a little deeper into your coaching practice in a bit. But Dr. Jean, I want to provide space for you to talk about a pivotal moment in your career that kind of shifted things for you.
Certainly, I actually have two to share. The first one was when I shifted from higher education, as I mentioned in my intro. I worked as a higher education administrator. I was an associate director of a Center for Teaching and Learning, and I really loved the work that I did. I loved my job. I felt that all the academic work I had done up to this point had prepared me for that work. Um, and I found myself working in a toxic work environment. So at the top of 2024, I was like, I have got to get out. So I did what most people would do, which was try to get a job while you have a job so you can leave that job and go to the next job. But it did not work that way for me. I was getting rejection after rejection. I mean, I would make it to the final round. And as time was progressing, um, I would say the work environment got tougher and tougher for me to be in, to the point in which I had to decide to resign. So I made sure I set myself up so that I could have some cushion. As I mentioned, I also teach, and I choose to teach adjunct. So I had two courses set up for the fall of 2024 in which I could teach. I was teaching at Columbia Theological Seminary, which is in Decatur, Georgia, online. So I was able to have some and generate some income. But it was when I quit that I finally found the job in which I transitioned into, which is in the foundation world. I work for a foundation. When I say it was the best job I've ever had before, it is, and I would love to talk more about how that job differed and how like the workplace and all of that was very much so different. Um, and I started working that job. It was great. I was a racial justice program officer. So, bending into 2025, when we had some shifts in our nation, we were doing some very meaningful work. When a lot of organizations were losing funding, we were blessed to give a lot of funding. So, though there were shifts in the United States, that foundation remained firm until the Board of Trustees decided to shut the foundation down on May 3rd. It was my day off. I'll never forget it. I was at home in my robe. And I got an email. I had a coworker tell me to check my email because I was off. I wasn't checking my email. And upon doing so, that's when I learned that the Board of Trustees made a decision to close the foundation. Again, not related to anything that was happening in the world, but it was actually related to the funder who happened to be a billionaire who got caught up in a Hollywood scandal. So when I say my book is going to be good, it's going to be great. Um, but as it relates to my career transition, one thing I want to highlight is like sometimes you have to choose to leave. And in doing so, I had to dig deep. I had to remind myself, one, of who I am, but also what transferable skills do I have? What do I actually want to do? And what type of impact do I want to have on the world? Were some of the questions that I worked through while trying to make that transition so that I could look out for the actual type of jobs that would align, back to Maureen's point on alignment, that would align with what I want to do in the world and the type of legacy that I want to build and impact I want to have. And then secondly, when I found out via email on my day off that my job disappeared, I immediately like went into shock. Like for that entire weekend, I was stressed out. I broke out in hives, like all the things, like the natural bodily responses were there. And then from there, I was blessed to work through July because we had to get the money out the door. We had to wrap up business and actually shut the place down or sunset, as we say in the foundation world. Um, and it was through that time that I had to just kind of do some mindset shifts and accept that, okay, this job is coming to an end, and ask myself, like, what even in this is their purpose? What is the purpose in this? And how might this give me opportunity to continue to lean into the type of work that I hope to do, but also just have a clear slate. Like I was finally done with the transition, though this is a major transition to lose a job. But to get there, it took a lot. And it's like my body and my mind and my spirit could finally catch up with one another once I got off that train of working. So those are my two major pivots. And again, I'm still, I guess, in the midst of one, which is pivoting into the next thing, but it feels different.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think your story, and particularly where you are right now, likely resonates with a lot of people right now. Obviously, it's a lot of layoffs that have been happening over the last couple of years, few years, and so it can be a tough time in these pivotal moments. And something that Maureen you brought up and that came up again was this concept of alignment. And alignment has come up. I think purpose has come up in our conversation as well. And so, purpose, alignment, values, these things are things that are important to me in my career. And just the concept of being in alignment is something that drives me on a daily basis. I want to talk more about that, about sort of practices or beliefs that keep you all grounded, keep you all going in these moments and these pivots, these transitions. What are those beliefs or habits or concepts that really keep you grounded and keep you moving forward? Maureen, how about we start with you?
Yeah, I
Go
mean,
ahead, Nuri.
I'm
Okay.
going back to the notion that what I've seen be most powerful with my clients, and I also do outplacement work, which is supporting people who've been laid off, and I support hundreds of them. When they can see a layoff or a termination, whatever it might be, as something that happened for them instead of to them, it makes a huge difference in how they show up
Mm,
in the pivot process, even if they are wanting to do the exact same thing in the exact same industry. If because the other piece that's part of it that we don't like to talk about as humans because it makes us uncomfortable, but is very real, is grief. Now, maybe that's my theology training or just who I am, but it's a reality. Career is such a big part of our identity and how we think of ourselves and how we move through the world. So that when particularly something happens outside of our control, which is often the case, the way we're predisposed to have a negative bias can jump to, oh, why did this happen to me? And that kind of thinking. And I've seen people get very stuck and very miserable looping through that. But the more that they can reframe and see it as an opportunity for self reflection, to seek alignment and embrace it as opportunity, the more powerful that pivot can be for them and gives them a sense of control.
that's good. That's good, Maureen. Thank you for that. You mentioned alignment a couple of times. How do you think about alignment? Just as a follow-up question.
Yeah, when I'm working with clients in private practice, I actually take them through a self-reflective set of exercises, values, strengths, different things like that. And ultimately have them make an alignment guide or rubric, just like you would have a rubric for a test. That's kind of your measuring stick for when you start to research jobs, when you're networking and talking to people, seeing where do you get that? Well, you do the 80-20 rule because that no thing is 100% unicorn, right? And if it is, write it until it goes away because all those things are out of our control. But we're looking for, I tell people if you had to be on one of those cheeky HGTV type shows where you're buying a property or whatever, and it's going to flash on the screen your list, what is your list for the next job? Not the rest of your career for all of time, but for the next thing in front of you. What is your list? What is the must haves? And what are the wishes that we know we're not going to get all of? So, really putting in the work to come up with that and not just at surface level. So some people start at surface. I don't want it to be toxic and I want to have a good boss. And those are great concepts, but they're very vague. So drilling down on what does a good boss mean to you? So for me, that's the process and the notion around alignment. Where do you get that connection with your values, your strengths, your priorities, whatever you've decided matters to you in this moment, in this next step?
Thank you for that, Maureen. Yeah, I work with on values alignment quite a bit with my clients as well. And I see we have a question in the chat around resources or tools. I think starting with values is a great place to start because it helps you really hone in on what's important to you. And those values, you may not get all of those embodied in your career, which is fine,
Mhm.
but for you to be able to just say, you know what, these six things are really what's core to me. It can be used as that tool as you do navigate kind of these different pivots in your career. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Absolutely. And also something you said, just to tag on there, is the notion of a holistic approach. Career can't be all things, just like one person can't meet all our social or relationship needs. So if you come up with that list and it's 10 things, maybe career meets six of them or five of them. Where do you get the others met? It's not just, oh, I can't get these met. Where else might you get them met?
absolutely. Nuri, you had come off of mute earlier. Talk to us about how you, like what habits or practices are kind of keeping you grounded through these pivots.
During my recovery process, I actually came up with a whole goal planning, goal tracking system. And that was actually the start of my goals unhindered based on my planner. And it starts with like, I love what Maureen says about alignment and actually making sure that career is not the only thing that you think about. Because I think it is very important. When I'm in my PhD program, my project was literally anything that was all my time was spent on just thinking about my project and the next steps for career. But I realized after the accident that, hey, I have been, not putting much time into my personal development, my family, my friends, my hobbies, all these other things that make us the whole person. And how do we not forget that? How do we keep ourselves in track of all these other goals that you may have in other aspects of life? And how do we actually have this, what Maureen called holistic success? And, one of the first things that I actually have my clients do is actually do a mind map. Write down 4 things, 4 categories: what you must have, what you want more, what you want less, and what you never want. These 4 things categorized, and that really helps you figure out, kind of help, track what you value and what you don't want. And you separate those out. And I think that goes back to what one of the questions was about, how do we know if they're actually in truly in alignment? Well, when you have a whole list of things that you don't want to do that you're doing that you need to cut out, then that's how you know. The next thing I do is also creating a long-term vision. Is what is it the thing that you want to see, and how would you know that you've been successful or you feel truly fulfilled? Like, what is a specific moment in time that you would truly imagine, like seeing and feeling and thinking and hearing? Like, what would that look like to you? And really jogging that memory down, and then trying to create the milestones toward it. And I talk about this 1% success, 1% progress, because too many times that we want to have this big milestone. But after grad school, I realized there's no milestones that to hit versus my personal things. And it has to make sense for what I want to achieve and what would actually make me feel good versus what the society tells us to. And one of the ways I help my clients track those goals daily in my daily review system is that 5-1-1 practice: 5 wins, 1 thing that didn't go right, and 1 thing to change tomorrow. And these things that you write down every day, it just takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes of your time before you go to bed, and write down the 5 things, even if it's so small as like, you made a stranger smile today. If they have nothing else to write, just writing something that was positive. And this actually trains your brain to pick out the things that are positive more from this, jumbled, sometimes really difficult to process. And sometimes people think of it as like all negative because there are a lot of negative things happening. And that's because we are focusing our attention on the negative things only. Why don't we flip that and focus on more positive things that are going right? And then reframe what you need to do differently for making things a little bit better next time. So that would be my yeah, there you go. 5 wins, 1 thing that didn't go right, 1 thing that you will change for tomorrow.
Amazing, amazing. Such a good reflection exercise, I think, for all of us to keep in our pockets for different parts of our career. And one thing that I love that you mentioned that I wanted to just overemphasize is that I think the moment in my career that I gave myself permission to design the career in the way that I wanted it to be versus what society and everybody else outside of me decided, it was a major part for me. So if anyone on this call is still feeling like the pressure to do something because your parents wanted you to do it, or you were on this journey and so you feel like you can't get off this journey because you've been on it so long, that can be out of alignment. And so give yourself permission to design the career of your dreams, the career that works for you in the season that you're in right now in life. I think that is so, so important, and is a big game changer for anyone at any part of their career. All right. Gina, did you want to add anything on this piece?
Sure, really quickly. One, thank you all for those reflection exercises that the coaches have lifted up and mentioned. I just want to affirm what Maureen talked about, particularly in the career pivot of like writing out and being specific what you're looking for in your next career. I did that when I pivoted from higher education into the philanthropic world. I wasn't thinking about going into social impact. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I was leaving where I was. It could have been that I remained in higher education, but ended up in a different place and space. But because one, going back to like mindset and just kind of things that were thinking about, or just kind of ways in which we trained our mind or open our mind up to even perceive the idea of a different career. One thing that I told myself as an educator, I told myself that the world is my classroom, not just a specific place, not just the academy, not just or simply an institution. The world is my classroom. That means I can teach anywhere. And it is the teaching that makes my heart sing. It's the teaching that brings me joy. So, whatever it is that you were trained to do, especially us being Emory people, look, we have some hard skills. We have a way of thinking and being about ourselves, especially those of us who went to undergrad at Emory. So, whether you went to grad school or undergrad, whatever it is, we are trained to be a certain way in the world. And I also want to invite us to think about how our training can still be operationalized in unconventional ways. So that might mean we have to kind of broaden our thought processes on what we're meant to do or what we want to do. I want to double down on the what we want to do because often we're too busy pursuing what we're supposed to do. I saw there was a comment in the chat about shoulds, and we have to throw those out the window to open ourselves up to possibility. So that was important for me, kind of having that idea of opening up the spaces for my own self where I can occupy space and show up and do work. But also just reminding myself that everything is working together for my highest good. So for the second career pivot, which was a layoff, I had to remind myself that this is not something that I caused or chose, or it was just completely out of my control. So all of the work that I did to transition and pivot into the new career, I didn't let that go. Right. I honored the fact that I did the work to get to where I was. I did the work to pivot. And that means all the dreams I had, all the goals that I already set, all that is still in play. It's just on pause in this moment. So I have not, I've chosen to not give it up. But I've also chosen to see or recognize, like, okay, I have some time to maybe work some other things out, right? So, how can I work on the fullness of my life? How do I continue to build the life that I want to live and not the world tells me I ought to live, or that I'm limited to living? So, that is some of the work that I have done in the past, and also some of the work that I'm doing now as I continue to navigate my career transition.
That's
Valerie,
amazing.
we have a couple of great questions in the chat.
Mhm.
And this one I feel like kind of falls along the alignment. That's why I'm interrupting. It says, one
Mhm.
challenge I'm facing is deciding whether to go back to a role within an institution or venture towards self-employment.
Mhm.
What are some practices that can clarify this question for those in
Yeah.
this situation?
Dorna, this is such a good question because I found myself in this moment, before starting my consulting practice. And one thing I might offer on this is that when I started consulting, I gave it a time bound. I said, okay, I'm going to give myself a year. I will go back to getting a job or looking for a job, but I will give myself 6 months or a year to see, is this a path that works for me? And so one tactic is to, save up as much money as you can and just jump into it and try it out for a time period of time, the entrepreneurship piece to see if that is a life that you want to live. It's a very specific life. You eat what you kill, the metaphor goes, but that really helped take the pressure off the decision for me. Sometimes I think we feel like, okay, if I'm gonna make my decision to start a business, that'll be my life forever. And that has not been my experience, nor the case that I've seen in other people's careers. So I think one piece of advice on that is to just try it out, try something out. Try to work on maybe a project in the direction of the area of entrepreneurship that you want to go in to see if that might inform you as well. But yeah, I want to open it up to the panel, like for our coaches, especially that have their coaching practices, what's one practice that we can give Dorna to kind of help process this decision?
The thing that comes to mind for me, is what I've seen with several clients and did myself, which is actually use the training wheels version in some way, which is start the business while I had a full-time job. I had the itch. I knew something was going to change, but it wasn't going to be immediate. I was still in control of it as best I could tell, right? So knew I had a runway. I could start to save. I could test it out. But if, I did it 6 months, 2 years, whatever, and was like, this isn't for me, no harm, no foul, I could just keep doing what I was doing because I too was deciding between a pivot out of higher ed, what that might look like. Um, when I'm working with clients, and what I wish I had known then is the whole you eat what you kill kind of thing. And that it's not just doing the thing you love. That goes back to that 80/20 kind of notion. Yes, I love coaching. I'd love to do that 24/7 of the work life. But a lot of what I do is the admin, the operations, the building the pipeline. And not that I'm not good at that stuff, not that I don't necessarily even not like that stuff, but it's not me doing the thing I love 100% of the time. So know that that's what you're signing up for. And that when you're building your own business, it brings in that grit and resilience piece that's part of this conversation, which is most every small business owner I know has to be scrappy and willing to like raise your hand, put yourself out there. Is that for you? Or do you have that kind of constitution? If you'd have asked me 20 years ago if I could do that, I would have said no. But through the course of my career, I learned that I could. So I don't know that that's a necessary practice, but it's some reflection to think about. Are you willing to ride the waves that comes with entrepreneurship is the feast or famine kind of notion. And can you be disciplined um, and keep yourself in a positive mindset during the downturns because they come?
Absolutely. Nuri, anything you might want to add on that?
I think both of you shared really important things already. I'm a scientist, so I use my experiment mindset. I always design my experiments, realizing before I even conduct the experiments, I write down or draw out what I expect to see as a result, and whether that's actually worth the effort of going through it or not. And so that really helps me actually in my workshops as well, in my sessions with clients, because not everyone is able to draw out what they want to see as a result, and do it in a data form and visualizing data. And for me, it was, of course, we had a time limit. Of course, we had to figure out, the different pivots I needed to make because my clientele has shifted over time, or my focus has been shifted, and the way I was structuring the business model was shifted. And so things like that is, happening. And you kind of have to go with the flow. And I think most of all, you have to know who you are as a person, what you're willing to deal with, like how much risk are you willing to take versus rather you rather not take the risk. Because truthfully, like it just sometimes wonder, like, am I cut off for an entrepreneur? And that kind of self-doubt is normal. I think pretty much every entrepreneur that I've met has that kind of moment of like self-doubt. But in the end, you have to see the bigger vision of why you're doing this in the first place, because same thing as going into a PhD program is no one asked you to do this, but you decide to do it anyway. And so that's kind of how I looked at it. Like, what skills can I get out of all the skills I've learned at Emory and turn it into my career path, and not just a job title, but really creating a result that you hope to see. To me, mine is grand. It's world peace. Ending the hunger. Like it seems very grand and impossible to solve. Okay, so what is the smallest thing I can do that get me closer to that grand ambitious goal? So that's what I do is planning out experiments, thinking ahead what sort of results I would like to get, and then trying to minimize like the smallest thing I can do to get there as closer as possible.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And I want to go into this conversation about grit. But before we do that, we do have a question in the chat about trying to decide between higher ed and a career pivot. And we do have some doctors on the call. So as you all were kind of considering your higher education, PhDs, Dr. Gina and Nuri, um, when you were considering that, was it what were you thinking about at your career when you decided to go PhD as a part of your career journey? Like if there's someone here trying to decide between higher ed and sort of a career pivot, what advice would you have for them?
I'm happy to share first, Nuri, because I'm sure you have some good reflections as well. The first question I would ask is, what field are you considering studying? And also, what field are you considering pivoting into? Because it could be that a career pivot may not require more education. You may just need more competencies, or you may need to do more certifications, or maybe even not, right? You may have everything you need already. So that's something to kind of ask yourself. But particularly regarding education, for me, I knew I wanted to be an educator, and I wanted to educate in the academy. So if you want to secure a job, it is in your best interest to get a PhD. However, there are people who get PhDs and go into different industries. So for me, I knew I needed the PhD to secure the type of job that I wanted and may go back to one day. You know, once you have a PhD, you can't get rid of it. It's there. So I can always fall back on and fall back into higher education once it figures itself out. And I will also say that maybe some personal questions to ask yourself is, why do you want to study? Because getting a PhD, it's not like a master's where it's over in 2 or 3 years. You're going to be doing that thing for a good 5 to 7 to 8 years. And also, like, do you want to sit with a subject for multiple years? Like, that subject becomes a part of you, it becomes a partner to you as you sit with it and you write a dissertation. And my dissertation was like 167 pages. So, and it's not a book, right? That was just to get a degree. So the question is, what commitment are you willing to make to a subject? Do you want to be in love with that subject for this time in this season of your life? And does being in a PhD program or a higher education program, this person said PhD specifically, does it serve you at this juncture of your life? Will you go full time? Will you go part time? If you go part time, it's going to be more than 5 to 7 years. So just think about the commitment it takes to that sort of work. Because it in and of itself is a work. And like Dr. Dury said early on, once you're done, that is it. Once they say you have defended, that's it. There's no, you can throw yourself a party, but it's it's fulfilling to some degree. But after you finish all that work, you're going to get back to work. So the question is, again, what commitment do you want to make? Does it make more sense to pivot in your career, or do you want to lean into education, which I thoroughly support as an educator, but I want you to be thoughtful about it.
Thank you so much. Nuri, any quick thoughts on this piece?
Yeah. I don't recommend it for everyone. I think it's not necessary, and it's something that you have to think deeply about why you want the PhD, because there's so many different ways to get knowledge that you need for a particular job or topic of business or what have you. There's so many different avenues to get that. But what is it that you want to get this 3 letters after your name for? And so you have to really dig hard at it, think about it, and whether that's really necessary for you, because it is a lot of time sink. Although I will say what I love about getting a PhD was that it was a protective time for me within academia, where I was asking such interesting questions with all those intellectual freedom that I wouldn't normally get in an industry job. And I was able to direct my own research project and direction. And that was something that, not a lot of researchers might, or not a lot of jobs in a industry setting might get. So that was important skill set for me to learn how to ask the right questions, how to design something, test something the correct way, and how to really think about something in a scientific way. And I think those skills still last forever. And even though I am no longer using a specific research tool that I was using in my PhD in my current role, I still think that there are a lot of transferable skills I gained, and it wasn't going away, and it won't go away. But to say it bluntly, I think you need to sit down and really think about why is it that you want to you would desire a PhD, and whether there are some other avenues that you can get the same sort of thing without such time commitment.
Amazing. Thank you for that. As I mentioned, I want to talk about grit. I want to talk about grit and resilience because I think sometimes when I think about resilience, I think about how am I responding to things that happen to me? And when I think about grit, it's a little bit more proactive in terms of what am I putting my energy and my time and my effort in order to achieve a certain goal, right? And at different parts of my career, grit has served me. And I want to bring in also this sort of generational conversation that sometimes comes up around certain generations don't want to put in the time, energy, and effort versus other generations. I believe that having grit at different parts of your career is beneficial. For me, it helped me establish myself when I was in corporate in order for me to do my job well and to get promoted. It served me in my business early on when I was trying to like think about what is going to be my differentiation, what are my service offerings, and it took some time and some energy to go through things in order for me to kind of get to that piece. And I'm curious of how you all think about grit, and think about how do you deploy your time, energy, and resources towards something in order to achieve a goal, and like what is the role of grit right now in career?
I'm happy to jump in. When I think about grit or how grit has been useful to me, particularly in career transition, it was in those moments in which I felt like the wind got knocked out of me and I needed to get back up. So when I have applied to jobs, going through 2 or 3 rounds of interviewing, imagine myself in the role, right? Been to the people's office if they had one and got a rejection. It took grit for me to get back up. It took grit for me to apply again, to look again, and to remember that something's going to work out. Someone's going to give me an invitation. Like the next invitation, the next yes is out there, but it's the grit that helped me to continue moving toward that invitation. At this moment in my career, as I am looking for a full-time job, but still very much so leaning into this sabbatical that was gifted to me in many ways, in embracing it, I am acknowledging that part of this time is meant for rest. And part of this time is meant for rest, particularly because whatever is ahead of me is going to require a rested Gina to do well, and to elevate to the next level in which I already feel in some ways I've moved into. That just means I got to get a little bit more rest. So as I'm looking for a job, I deploy grit within a certain time frame. So when I am searching, I'm focused. When I am applying, I'm focused. When I am networking, I am focused. But that is not an all day thing for me. I have particular set hours on different days in which I do different things. And it's not like this is my routine. Like, no, this is kind of, I can mix it up throughout the week. So maybe on Tuesday I'm sourcing, or maybe on Wednesday I'm applying, or what have you. I know what my goal is ultimately, either by the end of the week or by the end of the month. Um, but I would say I pull back a little bit on the grit in this moment because once I'm in the next thing, I know I'm turning it back on. So I think to your point, Valerie, it's important to know when to use the grit and when not to use the grit, and how using grit all the time might lead to burnout. And I don't think any of us want that.
That's good. That's good. And I think that's what keeps us away from like glamorizing grind culture, right? When you can deploy that grit in the seasonal times that it makes sense. Yeah. Nuri.
Me is reframing because I love what Gina said about the balancing between when you need to be breather and when you actually need to take a rest. And it comes with knowing yourself. Like when is it enough to push yourself versus when is it actually like you really need to listen to your body and be able to stay healthy in all aspects, not just career. Um, uh, in my PhD, I studied the mechanisms of how we learn and remember anything important. And that turned out to be actually something to do with the brake system in our brain, the brake, like your car. When there's an accelerator in your car, there's also a brake system in your car. And the way it works is that the brake is actually seems to be so much more important when it comes to realizing, okay, where do I need to head? The direction changes and need to focus on what's more important to me at the time. So it goes back to my moment of transition in my career was realizing, hey, I took this time as a break in my career. Some people might think of it as a setback. Some people might think of it as a suffering period. But instead, I decided to look at it as, hey, I took this moment for me to redirect my attention on what really mattered to me versus what was stressful at the time.
Amazing.
So, for me, and I'll try to make this quick. I know we're running on time here. Again, it goes back to, for me, that scrappiness, doing what you need to do, when you need to do it, how you need to do it. And usually there's some element of intensity, tenacity, and often scared or overwhelmed or some kind of negative possibility there that you might be feeling. But that being said, I don't think grit is just doing all the shoulds, just doing everything that's being asked of you, that kind of grind, hustle culture. Um, but it comes back to that alignment piece. And this word is a good example of it's really important that we each get clear on what it means for us individually and then deploy it in an aligned way accordingly. You've probably heard me say alignment about 40 times at this point in an hour. I can't stress it enough. So getting clear on
That important.
what it means to you and then seek it. Alignment is your North Star.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100% agree with that. Alignment is the North Star. Aram, can we close with the final question and then I'll turn it over to you about just have our panelists give us one practical strategy just to leave with the group here of, as folks are navigating career moves and transitions, one piece of advice or practical strategy, and then we'll close out.
One quick question that was earlier in the chat before
Mhm.
we wrap up. And I think it's a very important question, especially when it comes to alignment and a support system. How do you incorporate your spouse or significant other in these discussions and these decisions, or do you not?
Yeah, I think Maureen and I may dropped a few thoughts in there. I think for me personally, I think it's more about getting understanding about yourself individually and then bringing your partner or spouse into the conversation and invite them to do the same, right? I think two people have to find that sense of individual alignment and then come together to plan. And so I think the onus is on the individual to kind of do the work first, and then kind of go to the spouse or the partner. But that would be my advice there. Yeah.
And then to answer Ankita's question, I hope I'm saying it correct. Um, what I would, because we're short on time and we can't dive deep into your question, I would
Mhm.
recommend as an Emory alum, you have access to the career coaching program. And that gives you a free 30-minute session with all of our coaches. So that's 20 different insights that you can get on helping you figure out the best way to figure out how to know yourself, because that is hard sometimes. So I highly encourage you to fill out the career counseling form, which will be included in the email that I share afterwards. Sorry
Yes,
for the interruption, but I just didn't want people to hop off before I shared that.
of
Yeah.
course.
Well, and that would be the practice I would share is getting support. That you aren't meant to do this as an island. Yes, it's your work to do, but you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to be alone in this. Get a mentor, a coach to help you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Plus one. Maureen and I are here to help if anyone
Yeah.
wants to reach out to us. We definitely can have further conversations. But Dr. Gina Nuri, what would be your practical strategy for the group here around managing career pivots?
Direction is more speed. So stop to think and take the time, kind of a gap between movements. And as Maureen and Valerie, I also offer free coaching for Emory students. So take advantage of it. Let me know if I can help.
Yeah, and just to add on to what's already been mentioned, I would say embrace the pause, recognize the power in the pause, whether it's the pause in career or you pausing for a moment just to take a deep breath, and reminding yourself of who you are and just reminding yourself that you do have purpose and work to be done in the world. It's very empowering just to do that. And then also, lean on your community, lean on your friends, lean on your Emory network. We didn't go to this school for no reason. We chose Emory for a reason. Now, hopefully, one of them is the network, which is just a beautiful um, garden of people, a beautiful forest of people. We all have blossom, we all have bloom, we all have something that we are contributing in a beautiful way to make this world a better place. So I encourage everyone to lean in. You're not alone. And as I said at the top of the hour, we will get through.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for being here again. We are all here to serve as a resource for you as alum, as coaches, and thoughtful members of this beautiful community that we have here at Emory. So feel free to reach out to all of us, and Aram will follow up with ways to get in touch. But thank you again. Aram, do you want to close us out?
Sure. Yeah. Once again, I'm going to echo Valerie's sentiments. Thank you guys for joining us. Keep an eye on your inbox. You will get the direct contact information for Valerie and Maureen. And if Nori, if you want to share your contact information, we'll include that also. And I will share the links of the resources that we mentioned in here. And then once we end the webinar, there is a survey that will pop up automatically. It takes like less than a minute to finish. Please give us your feedback because we do look at that feedback and we tailor future events based on that. And then we have for next month, we actually have two different sessions that you guys can join. On March 11th, we have networking with ease. And then on March 24th, we have 10 transferable skills to help you change careers. So both of them, again, very relevant on networking and growing your career. And I'll share the website for that in the follow-up email also. Thank you again for being here, and I wish you guys a wonderful rest of your day.